No. Let's just get this block started. Can you believe we are on block number 48? Only 4 more to go. Well, I may have a bonus block up my sleeve, but you're gonna have to wait to the end of this series to find out if I actually do that bonus block. Now throughout this series, we've done various styles of quilt blocks, from strip piecing to crumb and string blocks, and more recently, we did some applique. We've sewn curves, and I do have a block that contains some Y-seams, just for practice. But, well, honestly, I'm not really looking forward to that block, so that we will save for block number 52. But there is still one technique that we haven't done, and that is paper piecing. Honestly, it's not my favorite quilting technique, but once you understand how the technique works, it's really not that hard. This week, we are going to construct an economy block using a free downloadable paper piecing template. It may be confusing at first if you are a beginning quilter, but again, once you get the idea, you'll find it's really not that hard. So to make this block, first and foremost, you will need a paper piece template. This template that I have here is a free download that I googled off the internet. I'll leave a link for you in the description below so you can download and print a copy of your own. Now notice that the template has a series of numbers, some solid lines and dotted lines, and I'll explain what all of that means later in the video. You will also need 5 squares of fabrics of your choice. Actually, let me clarify something. You really need 3.5 squares and 2 4 3/8 of an inch squares. However, sometimes I don't exactly line up the fabrics correctly, so I like to avoid that by overcompensating the fabric sizes. So I'm going to be using 5 squares. If you're an experienced paper piece quilter and want to use the more exact size of 3.5 inches and 4 3/8 inches, be my guest. Now in terms of fabric color choices, I'm going to use this yellowish gold color for the center of my block, and I will use some prints of pinks and greens. Feel free to choose whichever colors and prints you want. It's your block, you make it how you want to. So let's talk about the paper template for a minute. What makes paper piecing a bit confusing is the fact that it is sort of done, well, backwards. You see, the template helps you place your fabrics, but you actually place the fabrics on the back side of the template. The front of the template is where all the guides are. Well, makes total sense, right? Yeah. Take note that there are solid lines and dotted lines. The solid lines are your sewing guides. You will be sewing on those lines. The dotted lines represent your 1/4 inch seam allowance, and they're supposed to help you position your fabrics. Now, some paper piecing templates don't have the dotted lines because, well, it can get a little bit confusing with too many lines. However, most paper piecing templates I have seen will have a dotted line that goes around the block or the piece that you're working on, and that represents the line you cut on when you're ready to square up the unit. Most paper piecing templates will also have a series of numbers. These numbers represent the order in which you will sew the fabric pieces. With this particular pattern, number 1 is the center square, but take note that there are 4 triangular shapes that are numbered 2. This pattern is a bit unique in that when you're sewing your second piece, or in this case, pieces, it does not matter if you start with the triangle on the top, left, right, or bottom. As long as you sew all 4 pieces on before you get to number 3, you'll be okay. The same will go for the 4 triangles that are the number 3 pieces. Now, as a non-expert paper piece quilter, I like to fold the paper template on the solid lines. I find that this helps me when I'm positioning my fabrics. Or I will take a pen or pencil and trace the solid lines on the back of the paper template. Now, as you see here, I'm using a light box to help me see the lines from the back of the paper template. This light box is from a company called Caterpillar. And no, this video is not sponsored by them, so I am not paid to mention their product, but I know someone will ask. If you don't have a light box, you could tape the paper template to a window or some other light source and trace your lines that way. Okay, before we get to sewing, I have to decide which fabrics are going where. Now, this yellowish gold color, that'll be my center square. And the greens and pinks will be my number 2 and number 3 pieces. Now, starting with your center square, take your paper template and place the fabric on the back of the template. Again, with this template, I trace the solid lines on the back to help me place the fabrics. Pin the fabric to the back of the paper template. Now, you don't have to get the fabric perfectly centered, but you do want to make sure that the fabric piece covers that center square. Now, with the green and pink fabrics, cut them in half on the diagonal to make 8 triangles. Now, I'll be using the green triangles as my number 2 pieces, and the pink triangles will be my number 3 pieces. On the back of the paper template, place the triangle so that the diagonal that you just cut lines up with one side of that center square with the fabric's right sides together. Try and get the triangle as horizontally centered as you can, but it does not have to be perfect. Now, you want to make sure that the fabric 2 piece will cover the triangle shape on the paper template, which is why you see me flipping the fabric upward to double check that. And I have more than enough fabric to cover that top triangle there, so I can pin that green triangle to the paper template just to temporarily hold it in place and take it to the sewing machine. But remember that the sew lines are on the front side of the template, so I have to flip all of this over. Now, here at the sewing machine, I place the needle down right on the corner of that center square. I sewed a few stitches, backstitched a little, then continued to sew right on that solid line on the center square. When I get to the opposite corner, I stop with the needle down right on the corner, then backstitch a few stitches, then pull the unit off the machine and cut the threads. And at this point, I can remove my pins. And then from the front side of the template, I will fold the paper on the line that I just sewed on. With my ruler, I will measure and cut the excess fabrics 1/4 inch from the folded paper, which creates my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then I'll turn it back over, and you can either finger press the fabrics or you can take it to the iron and press them. For now, I'm going to finger press until I get all the number 2 pieces sewn on. Then I'll take it to the iron. And that is paper piecing in a nutshell. You place your fabric pieces on the back of the template, sew on the solid line on the front of the template, fold the template back, cut and trim the excess to create your 1/4 inch seam allowance, press open the fabrics, and then repeat. Now, every so often you may run into this problem where the fabric folded back onto itself and now you have to take it apart and redo it. Well, when this happens, first of all, step away from your sewing machine. Go into the kitchen and get your magic elixir. Yeah, let's just call it that. And start drinking that magic potion. Or go outside and throw the world's biggest tantrum. No, just kidding. Well, sort of. This happens to the best of us. Just grab Jack and pluck those stitches out. Now notice I did say pluck and not rip. Here's why. The paper has been perforated and you want to take the stitches out but not necessarily rip the paper. So I usually will pluck the stitches out rather than trying to rip right through that seam. And only take out as many stitches as you need to so that you don't damage the paper even more. So I corrected that little speed bump and re-sewed the seam. Now I am folding the template on the seam, trimming the excess fabric to a 1/4 inch seam allowance, then finger pressing the fabric back. At this point I have 2 of the 4 pieces sewn on. I will have to repeat it 2 more times before moving on to number 3. Now all of our number 2 fabric pieces are sewn on. I took it to the iron and gave it a good press, and we are ready to move on to number 3. Now sewing on the number 3 pieces is not much different from what we've already been doing. You place the fabric on the back side of the template, right sides together with the pieces that you have already sewn on. You're still going to sew on the solid line from the front side of the template. However, there is one slight difference on where you start and stop your stitches. Remember that most paper piece templates have a dotted line that goes around the block or the unit that you're sewing. That dotted line represents your cut line for when you are ready to trim and square up the unit. Now instead of starting your stitches on the corner or wherever that solid line starts, I'm going to start my stitches from outside that dotted line or that cut line. This way, my seams won't get affected when I do the final trimming and square up the unit. Also, I won't do any back stitching at the start and finish. I'll just sew and keep sewing right off the unit. One thing about paper piecing is that it's not exactly my most favorite quilting technique to do, and I don't know why. I just don't care for it, but I know how to do it. It's not difficult to do, but just for me, it's just a little bit more cumbersome. Now, I do know some people that love paper piecing techniques, and there is some pros and cons to it. The one thing that I will not argue about paper piecing is the precision that you can get. I mean, yeah, anytime I do or try the paper piecing technique, oh boy, say that fast 10 times. Well, not bad. But anyway, anytime I tried a paper piecing technique or block, well, my points came out pretty darn good. And so you really can't argue with that. But yeah, for me, it's just not my most favorite technique to do. I figure in this whole series, I've been trying to expose people to different techniques, especially because I know for a fact that a lot of you that are following this series are beginning quilters. So it's good to get a little taste of everything. Don't you agree? So now I've seen some beautifully done paper pieced quilts in some of the quilt shows that I've been to. One of the most famous paper piecer or paper piece pattern designers, of course, Judy Niemeyer. It's her techniques or her paper piecing quilts are a little bit more advanced, but the precision that you get out of those quilts, yeah, and the designs, oh, beautiful, beautiful. But I will say that doing a Judy Niemeyer paper piece quilt is not really on my bucket list of quilts that I want to do. But what's on your quilting bucket list? You know, I think we may have asked this question before, but well, let's pose the question again. So put a comment down below. Let us know, well, what's on your quilting bucket list, or what quilting techniques do you want to learn? Do you want to do applique, which we just did? Do you want to learn, I don't know, paper piecing techniques, which we're doing right now? Or are you a beginning quilter that just wants to try everything? Yeah, that's a good idea in my opinion. Leave a comment down below. Let everybody know what's on, or what techniques would you like to learn. Maybe we'll do it in a future video. I will say this, I'm a jack of all quilting techniques, but an expert of none. Well, at least I'm learning various techniques just to explore which ones that I like and which ones that I don't. And right now the paper piecing is on one of the sides that I just, yeah, it's not my favorite. You know, the other day I was having a discussion with a fellow quilting friend, and we were talking about some of the habits or bad habits that we have. And we were talking on a Zoom call, and I noticed that she was cutting some fabrics for an upcoming quilt that she was doing. And every time she would talk, she had her rotary cutter in her hand and she was cutting the fabrics, but every time she talked, she's one of those people that loves to talk with her hands, just like how I'm doing right now. And I noticed that every time she was talking, she would cut and then she would stop and then she would talk to me. Well, every time she did that, she had the rotary cutter in her hand and she's moving her hands around like this and just talking and talking. But the scary part was, yeah, she didn't have the safety on. So as she was talking, the blade was exposed. Not a good thing to do. And so finally I told her, hey, put the rotary blade down when you start talking. I mean, you're doing this, you're talking with your hands and you got the rotary blade exposed. Hello, not the safest thing to do. And then she realized, oh my gosh, I'm right. Then she went on to tell me a story about how she was talking to someone and she was talking with her hands like this and she didn't close her rotary blade. So yeah, she cut herself. Not a good thing to do. So I told her, well, you know what? Here's a good habit to pick up on, and this is something that I try to do. Whenever I'm rotary cutting, or whenever I'm fabric cutting and I'm done cutting the fabric, I drop the rotary cutter out of my hands. What do I mean? So I'll cut the fabric, close the blade, and drop it. Cut, close, drop. Oh, did I just break my rotary blade? No, we're okay. That's been my slogan when I cut fabric. Cut, close, drop. Oy. Oh, I think I just broke my rotary cutter. Nope, still good. You know, this rotary cutter is actually very durable. Well, I mean, it's a cheap plastic thing, but pretty durable if I could just drop it like that. So, again, cut, close, drop. Yeah. And to me, that worked. Well, sometimes I still tend to do this too. But when I notice that though, I'll just put it out of my hand. So normally when you see me on the videos like this, you'll see me do that, where I'll cut the fabric and just drop it, put it out of my hands. But now I'm still kind of developing that habit where I might be fussing around with the fabric and I'll have the blade exposed, and I'm trying to correct that now. Now, bad habits are hard to break. Which leads me to this week's real question. What habits or what bad habits do you have with quilting? I know some of you out there are probably the same, where you have the rotary cutter and you start talking to someone and you do this, you talk with your hands, and then you might not notice that the blade is exposed. Now, maybe you should do cut, close, drop. Yeah, but what bad quilting habits do you have? Leave a comment down below. Just fess up. There's no need to be ashamed of it. We're not judging you for it. But I notice, like other YouTubers, when they cut, especially with the rotary cutter, they will cut. Oh, you're supposed to cut away from you, but I notice sometimes they cut towards them when they want to try and cheat their way through. Yeah, not a bad idea. Or not a bad idea. Not a good idea. And I notice also a lot of quilters, and I'm not sure why, they like to lick their finger when they're trying to sort through fabric. To me, that's a little unsanitary. Like, they'll do this. I don't know if that actually helps. Yeah, well, I'm the only person that's going to be touching this fabric, so. Oh, and here's another one. The ever popular pin in the mouth. Not the safest thing to do. Well, especially if you have a pet or a kid that just makes a surprise in your sewing room. Yeah, because if you bite down on one of these buggers, trust me, you'll be piercing your tongue or piercing something you don't want pierced. I've had some close calls with that. But I know it's just so easy to do. I mean, I even see people or the fashion designers on certain shows. Yeah, they'll do this. And they take the pin out, or they put the pin just to hold it in place. Not a safe thing to do, and also not a sanitary thing to do. But we keep doing it anyway. So again, I ask the question, what bad habits do you have when it comes to quilting? Are you a person that uses the rotary cutter or takes shortcuts when you cut your fabric? I will admit, I do that. Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm a bad fabric cutter. Alright, so I'm just about done sewing this block, so let's talk about some variations that you can do with this block. And so here is my finished block. Now this block measures 6.5 inches. Well, in this case, I won't say give or take your 1/4 inch seam allowance, because again, with paper piecing, it's pretty darn exact. Now, one of the things I wanted to make mention on this particular block is your fabric choices. Now, I chose to actually use 2 different fabrics for each of the layers, but if you want to use the same fabrics, you can go ahead, or if you want to use totally different fabrics altogether, that's your choice as well. Now, the other thing that I noticed, or the other thing that I wanted to mention is for this center block, you could do something different. Here's an example. Now, I had some leftover 9 patches from one of the previous blocks that we did, which was the Irish chain. That block, that 9 patch, well, it measured 3.5 inches, which is just big enough to actually fit that center square. So instead of using one solid fabric like how we did in this tutorial, you could choose to put a smaller block, or if you want to fussy cut a certain design from a piece of fabric that you got, as long as it's 3.5 inches big, you could do so. Now in this example, I did use the same fabrics here as well as the outer corners. Again, you don't have to do it scrappy, or you can just choose to do the same fabrics. Again, that choice is yours. It's your block, you make it how you want to do it. So taking a look at both of these blocks side by side, well, you can make the choice. Do you want to fussy cut something, or do you want to have like a center, special center, or do you want to just use some solid fabric here in the center? Again, the choice is yours, but notice that the focus of this block, or this particular block, puts the focus on what's in the center. It does the same thing too here. So again, if you have a fabric that you want to highlight the motif, or you want to fussy cut it, this is actually a great block to do to actually highlight that fussy cutted print. Well, that's it for this video, and I hope you give paper piecing a try, because, well, as I said, it's not my favorite technique, but can't argue with the precision that you get, and you get some great looking blocks. So give it a try. Just see if you like it or if you don't. Now, as always, go out and create something. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications on when I upload the next video. Put a comment down below saying what you liked, or maybe even what you didn't like. And join the Facebook discussion group at Treasure Heart Creations. You can post pictures of the blocks that you created, or just scroll through and gather inspiration from other Treasure Heart Creation Group members. And from time to time, there are giveaways exclusively for Treasure Heart Creation Group members. So use the link in the description box below to sign up. If you're on Instagram, post pictures of the blocks that you're working on using the hashtag THC5252. Well, that's it for now. Now go out and create something.